Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Really glad you guys have decided to tune in, let us into your home. My name is Adam, and I'm a part of Cicero Christian Church. And our goal tonight, our desire is to just take a minute just to acknowledge that this holiday season is typically full of joy and celebrations and a lot of fun, but it's not that way for everybody. And I think we sort of always know that that's true, but sometimes it's hard to really know how to engage and be really aware of people that struggle through the holidays. And especially this year. This year is going to be tougher than most for just for reasons of precautions that we have to take and plans that just are going to have to change because of our desire to show love to people and protect people from the spread of the virus and things like that. So we've just sort of identified 4 areas that we think make it really difficult for people to enjoy the holidays. People dealing with grief, the loss of a loved one, people who deal with anxiety or depression on a regular basis, people who deal with family conflict, and people who are going through divorce or have recently gone through divorce. We know that those things can make the holidays very challenging. So our goal is that tonight would just be a conversation starter. What we really believe is going to be most helpful is for you to make connections with people beyond this evening that will allow you to talk, to be open and honest, to receive some love and support and prayer, and to find a Jesus-centered path forward. That's what we really want to see happen. And we can't do that on a computer screen, but hopefully what we can do is give you a chance to hear some other people talk who have been down a similar path that maybe you're on, and be aware that first of all you're not alone. That a lot of people have gone through similar things to what you're dealing with, and that there's hope for something better. So hopefully that's the message that you'll get from the guests that we have invited to come and share tonight. And for those of you that are not actually going through something like this now, but you have someone in your life that you love and care about that may be dealing with one of these issues, we hope to give you some healthy ways to have conversations that are healthy and help people move forward in these areas. So a couple things you need to know as we go through. First of all, we're going to invite you to ask some questions in real time. And so there'll be a slide that'll show up on the screen every now and then that will encourage you to text the word question to a phone number that'll be on the screen. You'll get a reply back that will ask you to enter your question. And we'll try to cover as many of those questions that come in as we can at the end with a panel of all of our guests. Another thing that I want to make sure you're aware of, we have talked with everyone about the precautions regarding masks and things. And so every situation that you see on stage tonight will be something that the people on stage are comfortable with. Sometimes we'll be wearing masks and sometimes we won't. And that's by the choice of everyone involved. But we are aware of that. And finally, we want you to know that after this event this evening, we will have resources on our website. You can go to our website and you'll be able to find resource packets for each of these areas that we're going to talk about: grief, divorce, family conflict, and anxiety and depression. And in that packet, you'll find daily scripture guides, you'll find prayer guides, you'll find conversation guides, and you'll find a list of resources that can give you more information and just different perspectives and help for moving forward. So once again, thanks for joining. It's not too late. If you know somebody who should be watching and you're not sure if they know about this, give them a quick call, send them a message, and encourage them to tune in right now. And we're going to get ready to start with our first conversation about family conflict here in just a moment.
Yeah, we're going to talk to each other. So I'm here with Cameron and Mandy, a couple of legendary educators in our community here. Real excited to have a conversation with you guys. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourselves? Where do you work? Where do you live? That kind of thing.
Yeah, we both work at a place called the Academy, which is the alternative high school in Hamilton Southeastern District. I'm the social worker there, and Cam is the teacher.
Yeah, and prior to that, I was a teacher at Hamilton Heights for 11 years ish, and just loved every minute. And now we just get to unite at a different school, working with a bunch of kids that we think are really awesome.
You were a local celebrity, or still are. It's kind of wearing off a little bit. But so our job today is to unpack a little bit about conflict. And coming here to the end of, I think, the longest year in history, there has been a lot of opportunity for disagreement. And I think a lot of people might be going into this holiday season a little maybe anxious about what conflict might look like when we get there. So I just want to start by asking you guys, what has been your experience with family conflict?
We realized probably pretty quickly into our relationship that we grew up in two very different homes, and conflict looked really different. And we may not have realized that until we started to encounter some things ourselves. So from what we see in our own families, from what we see with the students that we work with, you a lot of times deal with conflict the way you saw it, right or wrong. What you saw your family do is kind of the way that you handle it. That's kind of the way you're taught, even if you know that's not the way you want to do it.
Sure.
It's really hard if that's what
it becomes
you
our
see.
default setting.
Exactly.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And for us, that plays out in a lot of different ways. When we're with family now, we go into this setting where we're with people who raised us and showed us their example of how to deal with conflict. And now we maybe deal with it differently based on our own experiences with each other and learning from things that we've encountered. And so now we're walking into an environment where the way we will deal with conflict isn't how it used to be.
Sure.
And isn't how this group is comfortable with. So recognizing that tension and that difference has been key and important, and is still, an ongoing.
I know for me, there's some things that I didn't realize they were weird until I experienced a relationship with somebody who thought that was weird.
Right.
They help point out that. So, what are some things when it comes to these conflicts, disagreements, different types of approach to conflict? What are some do's and don'ts that you've learned along the way?
So one of our family mottos is listen first. So don't go into a conversation already knowing what you're going to say, or if somebody's talking in your
just
head,
thinking about how I can
just,
burn you.
Yeah, you're just waiting to respond. You're not listening to what they say at all. You are just waiting for that opportunity to kind of go after them to bring your point or put your point across. And we always try it, not always do it well, but try to listen first.
Sure. And I think to build on that, one thing we've tried to embrace is the idea that when we're with family, especially the ones that we don't see as often as we would like, that it's important to try to get beyond the question of how's work, how are things going, that surfacey type stuff, and really invest in this relationship that matters a ton. I mean, this is family, and that's not something that we want to take for granted, and we want to continue to build. And kind of in conjunction with that, we know that in our specific family, we've got a little 2-year-old daughter, Lucy, who we think is awesome, but it can be a default to, once the family gets together, to watch the kid in the middle, right, and not have interactions with the other adults there. And I'm sure in other families there's some similar issue where it's not as much about true engagement with the people that you really care about and want to talk to, but it becomes, what's the distractor? Can it be just watching a kid? Can it be just watching a football game? Can it be just talking about the food that we're eating so that we can get through this time? and then later you realize, okay, we missed it this chance.
Sure.
So for us, that's been big to try to understand, okay, we need to invest while we're here. Who knows what we're going to think afterwards if we don't.
We also believe that don't air things out on social media. That's not the way to move a relationship forward. That only causes some hurt feelings and problems. And if you want to move forward or try to have a conversation, don't do it on social media. Do it together. Talk
Sure.
about it. Things do not end well.
You said something about at the beginning that I want to kind of circle back to. You said that when you start with a posture of listening, right? Your default setting is to listen. And I think we all know that when you listen, like for the other person to feel heard is good. But do you find that listening does something in your own heart, maybe to your ability to feel compassion or empathy with the other person?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. People come into a situation and they're not thinking that they, usually want to hurt somebody else. That's not the intention.
I want to fix the things that you think wrong.
Right. So it's really important that we have different life experiences. We've seen different things. We've had different conversations. We've, believed certain things. And it's important to try to see that in the other person, that they're not your enemy, they're not against you, but we have a lot to learn from each other, even if we disagree with something.
Sure.
Yeah, 100%. And I can tell you that I'm married to one of the world's best listeners. Just flat out, it's true.
My wife is not.
And it plays out in her job, and it's why she's so good at that. But then also within our family structure too. It was just automatic when our family started to blend. For example, it was within weeks maybe that people started to like her way better than me, right?
I feel that.
And that has a lot to do with the fact that she just listens and shows that she cares. And you're right, it does have a huge effect for sure.
Cool. So is there a secret, I think one of the questions that we all feel like this tension is do I engage with that? Like if Uncle Henry says something and it's like makes you bristle up, maybe, how do you know when, okay, he's not gonna, let's just let him, I don't need to engage in that, but how do you know when it's something like, this is something we really need to have a conversation? How do you differentiate those two things?
Yeah.
That's a great question, and I don't know all the way.
There's no formula.
But Wisdom. I think it's important, to kind of reflect on yourself and see what is your goal here. Is my goal just to be right and to show you that I'm right and to maybe say it a little bit, maybe to say it a little bit louder than you and sound a little bit smarter than you and show that I know more than you? Or is your goal to actually move the relationship forward and have it grow?
Mm-hmm. And we really believe in general terms that we should not swing at every pitch and probably should not swing at most pitches. We're definitely more likely to, leave time with family wishing we had not said something than wishing we had.
Yeah. I know that for myself, I find myself looking for opportunities, I could hit a home run here instead of I could learn something here.
Right.
And the times where I'm like, oh, what do I need to learn? I think we both walk away happier than whenever I'm like, oh, let me hit a home run off your
Which is hard because in the moment, the home run seems really fun.
Yeah.
Right?
Nobody doesn't want to hit a home run,
Exactly.
right? So when it comes to family disagreement, or maybe just friends, when it comes to people and disagreement or conflict, what's the ultimate goal that you want to keep in mind? The thing in the back of your head, no matter what he says, no matter what I say, we can disagree, we can have conflict, but I want this to be true. I want to land on this place. What's your ultimate goal?
Yeah, I think the ultimate goal is how do I love this person well, and how do I move this relationship forward? So one thing I think about a lot, and I talk to students a lot about, is anger is is usually a much easier emotion to deal with than sadness, than depression, anxiety, having any kind of vulnerability. So it's just so much easier to resort to anger.
It has easier outlets for sure.
Yeah.
You can hit stuff with a baseball bat.
Yeah. And that's what I think a lot of people do, because that is an easier emotion for people to kind of handle themselves. Maybe they don't react the right way with it, but they would rather feel angry than feel something else. So,
and some of us never even process to, like, there are a whole, like, spectrum of emotions, and it's just easier to, like, weird or different or confusion. It's just like, if you put that in the anger, you know what to do with it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It just it makes sense to a lot of people, even if it's wrong. But I can tell you right now, especially with everything that's been going on, when I'm talking to students, they're telling me constantly, like, everything just makes me angry, or everything is upsetting me right now, or I just want to punch a wall. And they said little things can set me off. And I think we really need to remember, as we're living right now in 2020, that things are hard. And we always say, like, what's the thing behind the thing? So when somebody is coming at you angry or bringing up conflict that maybe doesn't make sense, there's probably more to it than that. There's something
about
deeper.
Something else. Yeah.
So the goal should be, okay, how do I love them, and how do we make this relationship better and stronger?
Yeah, and connected to that, when we feel the anger ourselves, what's the thing behind the thing? What are we really? What are we really feeling deep down? Yeah.
Oh yeah, like, what I know what you said set me off,
right?
But is it because, like, there's something off between us? Like,
right.
I just am assuming some things. I think that's a big one. Like, we assume negative intentions with people who disagree with us, because our opinions are based on our values. So if you have different opinions, then you have different values, and you have different values because you're a bad person. Like, it's real easy to go through that.
Absolutely.
Even if we don't do it consciously. So the last question, this is what I want to end on, and this is really, I think, at the core of what we're talking about here. What role does our relationship with Jesus play into conflict? Maybe a better way to ask is, how should we look different than people without Jesus because we have Jesus in our life, as it pertains to conflict?
Yeah. So I think we know for sure that there's a really big God who loves us a lot and wants to get into the mess with us. So when we're feeling all these emotions going into family situations, or even outside of family situations, he wants to be right there in it with us, just, in the raw emotion of dealing with it. And so I think that's one thing that we want to walk into any of this knowing there's a God inside me who doesn't want me to do this alone, or doesn't want us to do this just the two of us. And I think that also gives us an opportunity to lean on that for perspective, for humility. I mean, we certainly don't have it all figured out by any means, and for patience in so many ways. And then lastly, we know that God granted us this family. I mean, we are full of gratitude for it, and that comes through knowing that, we get to have these interactions with people who love us a whole lot, and that is because there's a God that loves us a whole lot.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think one of the beautiful things about Jesus, everything he did and everything, he came in and did it differently than people expected him to. So when you're looking at conflict, a lot of times you have the expectation of how somebody's going to react. And when you do that differently, with love, with humility, with listening, I think that is a great example an opportunity to show Jesus' love and kind of how he wants us to look at people differently.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to reflect his character in a really real and tangible way. Sure. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate this conversation. We're running out of time. But if you guys have more questions, these guys will be in the panel at the end. Text in that number that has been at the bottom of the screen. It'll come up later if you missed it. But that's it for us right now. Moving on to the next thing.
So I'm here with Russ, who has bravely agreed to come and talk to us a little bit about maybe how we can manage going through divorce or having been through divorce during holiday seasons and really any time. So Russ, I'm going to just let you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your history, give us a little 60-second version of your history, and then we'll dig into some questions here.
Sure. Well, I'm currently married to Susan. We've been married for 11 years. I have an insurance agency here in Noblesville. But previous to that, I was married to another lady, Linda. We were married for 20 years. A lot of that time was actually in the ministry. And she made a decision in 2008 to divorce me. It was not a mutual decision at all, but she made that decision, and so I went through a divorce with her in 2008, and that was certainly the most difficult time of my life.
Yeah, divorce usually is. So do you remember your first holiday season after your divorce? What was that like?
I do. It was difficult, and it was very different. I mean, all of our holiday seasons before were spent with lots of family time, that sort of thing, and then this one was just going to be entirely different. And I mean, to be honest, I don't know that I really handled the first holiday season all that wonderful. It was difficult just to get through it. I did.
You have kids?
I have 3 kids. They're now 29, 26, and 23. But at the time, they were, I'm trying to remember their exact age. I think they were like 16, 14, and 8.
Yeah.
Or 16, 14, and 10 rather. And so
it was different for them too.
Oh, it was incredibly different for them because beforehand, I mean, Christmas and holidays were a time of celebration and was just extra time together and fun and all that, and now it was going to be time where we were going to be separate, and trying to figure out how to negotiate all that was really challenging.
Yeah. What are some things that you learned, like maybe from mistakes or things that you did well, but what are some things that you learned that you've been able to apply, in the years since then that have been helpful?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that I learned not to do was not to look back. I think that was one of the biggest challenges that I had.
Mm-hmm.
Was I would look back to what my life was, and realize it wasn't that anymore. And so stuff like, being angry, and being, being sad, dealing with things like self-pity, all that. When I spent time looking backward at what was not there anymore, it was very, very challenging. I also, I was certainly tempted at times to say some negative things towards, with the kids, towards, maybe some things that their mom had done to hurt me, and that just never went over well with them. I mean, it was their mom. They loved her very dearly,
Yeah.
and I only made that mistake a time or two, and I learned very quickly that's really not a road that's helpful for them, and a road that I wanted to go down. What I did on the flip side to actually, I think things that I did that were helpful, one of the things that I did that was really helpful was engaged in a conversation with a friend of mine named Steve. He was a guy that I was in the ministry with, but he was a counselor kind of on the side, and got together with him, and he drew me out. I mean, it was actually, he lived in Illinois. I drove 2 hours over to get with him every week.
Yeah.
Because it was that valuable to me, and he drew me out and asked me questions and validated, things that I was feeling, and pointed me in the right direction, and that was really, really helpful.
Was it hard
for me.
for you to talk about it at first, or did you find that you just needed to?
No, I mean, everybody's wired different. I'm not a particularly secretive person, and so I felt it very therapeutic to be able to talk about it. I felt like I needed to talk about it. I was hurting, and I wanted to talk about it. I wanted somebody to hear me out and listen and understand what I was feeling, and it was actually very, very helpful for me.
That's good. That's an important step, I think. Just finding somebody that you trust, that you can share, like you said, somebody that can draw you out is really important, because I think a lot of times our friends will sort of play it soft, let us get away with not going too deep. And it's important to have somebody that will really kind of ask you the hard questions and make you think about things that maybe you'd rather not think about.
Yeah, he was very good at asking difficult questions, and but I found it very, very helpful. Every time I would walk away from there, I felt listened to and understood.
Yeah. What role has your relationship with Jesus played in not just initially going through the divorce, but sort of how you've grown and processed that since then?
I think my relationship with Jesus has been the most important thing in terms of handling it and growing through it and kind of coming through it on the other end. When I first was going through my divorce, I think one of the things that I wanted to, there's an old saying, right? Misery loves company.
Yeah.
I searched out every pathetic story in the Bible because I wanted somebody to relate to.
Yeah.
So I mean, I looked at, Joseph when his brothers threw him away. I looked at Job when his life, fell apart. I looked at Hosea when, his wife left him, and I mean, I would study those passages because I needed somebody. I needed to understand that somebody understood what I felt.
You're not alone.
That I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I spent a lot of time looking at during that time with Jesus was how deeply he actually loved me and cared for me. Because Linda, my first wife, I absolutely considered her my very best friend in the world.
Yeah.
And then she walked away. And I was devastated. And I always said before, and I felt like I had a deep relationship with God before, but it helped me to understand this one truth, that God's love for us is so deep that he will never, ever walk away from us. If anybody does any walking, it will be us that will walk away from him. He will not walk away from him. I spent a lot of time in the book of Isaiah, kind of chapters 40 and on.
Yeah.
Those chapters have a lot to say about God's depth of love for us. There was one particular verse, I think it's in Isaiah 49, where it talks about that it talks about a mother remembering the baby at her breast. And then it goes on to say, but she might forget that. And I thought, what mom would forget that?
Yeah.
But God's saying, there's a chance. But then he follows it up by saying to Israel, there is no chance I will forget you.
Yeah.
And I just, it really helped me to understand how deep God's love is for me, and which was something I needed very badly
At
during that time.
Sure. That's powerful. If you could offer some encouragement to somebody that's maybe going through this, particularly through this holiday season for the first time as a divorced person, or just in general, how would you encourage somebody who's dealing with this right now?
Well, what I guess what I would say, one is give yourself some patience and grace, because it takes a while to work through. I mean, I suppose some people work through it a little bit quicker than others, but for most of us, it takes quite a while to work through it. I remember there was a person that was close to me and told me, I mean, after a few months, they said, just get over it. And I said, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, that's not helpful.
And I think one of the things is realizing it's going to take a while, and give yourself some patience. And the other thing is that God really does have a new chapter. I mean, my life right now is fantastic. It's wonderful. I mean, and there's a hurt, there's a pain over what happened, but it's more of a scar.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It used to be a deep pain. Now it's more of a scar.
Sure.
And God has opened up a brand new chapter in my life. It's fantastic, and I'm happy and love my kids, love my wife, enjoying life. But God's really the one that got me through into this new chapter.
Well, thanks so much, Russ, for sharing. I know that your vulnerability here is strength for somebody else, so we really appreciate you doing that. And for those of you who are watching, just want to encourage you, if you have a question for Russ, he'll be in our panel later on. Just text that keyword to that number, and you'll get a prompt to send a question in. And stay tuned for our next segment, which is on grief. And I've heard many people say that divorce is sort of like a loss. It's sort of like a death. And we deal with it in a lot of the similar ways that we deal with losing somebody that we love. And so stay tuned for the next segment on grief as well. Thanks.
I'm Amber, and I have the pleasure of sitting here with Jim. And Jim is going to talk to us a little bit about grief. The reason we thought of Jim for this conversation is because he has been working through the loss of his wife, Kathy. Jim, to get us started, would you take a few minutes and just describe Kathy for us and just share a little bit about what your relationship was like?
Wow. I met her at 13 on my paper route. She moved into my paper route. I fell head over heels for her right away, and carried that with me for about the next year or so. And then we started drifting apart a little bit, but still we became best friends, and that friendship lasted for 53 years. Mm-hmm. And we didn't start dating really until the end of our junior year. Just before prom, I asked her it was a fluke date. I had tickets to a concert. I said, "Who wants to go?" And she turned around and said, "I will." So we did, just as friends, and it turned into romance pretty quickly. So we dated for a couple of years, and then at 18, I was at college, she was finishing beauty school, and we got married. And at 19, we had our first of 5 children, and after all this time, I'm still madly in love with her.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. What is difficult about her passing during the holiday season, especially?
Well, Kathy had a very vibrant personality, and everything she did was an extension of that. And I mean, she'd had me captured since I was 13. So, she made our home. She decorated our home so it was just beautiful for everyday living. And then on holidays, she went over and above probably so much. And so, it's not just the holidays. My gosh, I was with her 24/7, except for in the first couple of years, I was off basic training, was gone for 4 months. I pined for her the whole time. And so when I came back, just everything, it was every day. It was something. And when she was gone, I knew it was going to be a long-term pining for me because she was such a part of my life and had been for much of my life already up to that point. And this was 5 years ago. She was 66 years old by then. We were married 47 and a half years, and I was still crazy about her. And so was she about me.
I don't believe that. What have you learned when grief is at the center of the conversation? What have you learned about what to do and what to not do while you're coping with grief?
Oh gosh, I've learned a lot. I too had a friend named Steve, who was a friend for 45 years. The best thing to do is I don't care who you are or how strong you think you are, get somebody else involved and make it regular and make it somebody that can help. I've reached out to others, and that's my number one advice is to get help from someone else and somebody that can help you. I had a friend, Steve, I'd known him for 45 years. His wife had died 13 years before that, and he reached out to me. So many times people say, well, give us a call, and if you need any help. You don't do that. They have to reach out to you because you just don't reach out to people. You don't want to be a bother. You don't want to interfere with their lives. But Steve reached out to me, and he had gone through a Christian training called Stephen Ministries, and then later became a group leader for Stephen Therapy. And so he called me as soon as he heard of her diagnosis and said, I'm here for you, brother, and I'll reach out to you. And so that was a comfort just right there. Kathy had made the decision not to get chemo or radiation. Her diagnosis was stage 3 cancer already because she had refused to go to doctors. So she decided, well, isn't this the whole reason we're here, is to go back to the Father? Mm-hmm. So she said, he'll either heal me here or he'll heal me there. So she chose not to go through that. She saw her mother do it 20 years earlier, and it just wasn't pretty. So she lived a pretty full life for a year and a half after her diagnosis. And so shortly after her celebration, we had a celebration service right here. Went for a long time. But it was
a celebration.
It was.
Like, for real.
Yes. About a week later, Steve called me and followed up. He said, I will reach out to you. And he offered to put me through the 6-week series of therapy that he does with groups. Only he'd do it one-on-one. Mm-hmm. He lived in Beech Grove. So I drove down to Beech Grove for about the next 2 to 3 months. And we would sit at his house for a couple hours, just talk about the materials, which were just wonderful for me. And then we'd go to lunch, we'd talk for another couple of hours. And it was life-changing. Particularly some of the things that I learned. For example, it got me talking about it. That was a big thing. I'd wanted to just curl up in a ball and dry up and go away. But I knew I couldn't. I still had family, I had a lot of grandkids. I've got 14 grandchildren. And so they still needed a papa now that their grandmother was gone. So I learned to talk about it, and I learned to get released my emotions. If you bottle it all up, you're going to explode, because grief is like a container. It's happened, it's in there, and you have to get it out, because it will bubble up over if you don't. And so I found that talking about it with Steve and releasing those emotions, and particularly he showed me things that were probably going to happen. He said that happened, and there's no set pattern for it. It can be all over the board. It can jump at you out of nowhere. These grief bursts, they call them. And so he told me that these things were coming. It made me mad sometimes. What do you mean that's going to happen? And so it was huge to know that those things were going to come. And then also it started me on the long path of healing. You never really get over grief. I mean, it's like Russ had said, it's a wound. It starts as an open wound, and slowly over time it heals, but you never get rid of the grief totally. Yeah. And so mourning is a part of healing that grief, talking about the person you love that you've lost, reaching out to other people and talking to them, and getting joy of helping other people that are going through the same thing. That was a big thing. But the huge thing for me was what to expect. Not when to expect it, but what to expect. One example, Steve told me, he says, you'll probably have people that will start backing away from you over time. Some may even say you need to get over your grief. And that was very hurtful. It did happen to me. I thought, nobody's going to be that crass.
Sure.
They were. But he helped me understand what they were going through. It was my grief, and they were getting tired of it. And even though that sounds selfish, I understand. It wasn't their problem. It was my problem.
Sure.
And it was something that I was willing to work through. They didn't need to stay. So it was okay for me to let them go. Don't cling on to them and be upset about it. Let them go. They may come back. They may never come back. I've had both instances happen. So the person, you really never get over grief, but you learn how to live with it. And that's an important thing. And when I said that it was huge knowing what to expect, a lot of those things came true. I didn't want to hear them, but he stuck with it, and he says, you've got to hear this.
Yeah.
And when they came true, I knew I wasn't going crazy. I didn't drop into hopelessness. I went, oh, this is part of the grieving process, even though I didn't want to face it.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have somebody that you can trust, that can validate some of those feelings for you. Can you share with us how Jesus has impacted your journey with grief? I know that's a complex question.
If it hadn't been for Jesus, I might not be here today. I don't know. I could have slipped into hopelessness and depression, and I felt like I was going crazy. And there were times when I thought I was going crazy, but having Jesus in my life, I knew that because Jesus had died and rose from the dead, I was going to too.
Yeah.
And Paul talked about that, and if you don't mind, I want to read a passage from Thessalonians, which gave me great encouragement. Dear brothers and sisters, 1 Thessalonians 4. Dear brothers and sisters, we want you to know what will happen to believers who have died, so you will not grieve like people who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and was raised to life again, we also believe that when Jesus returns, God will bring back with him the believers who have died. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a commanding shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with a trumpet call of God. First, the Christians who have died will rise from their graves. That's their bodies. Their spirits have been with them all this time, but their bodies are going to raise from the grave. Then, together with them, we who are still alive and remain on the earth will be caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Then we will be with the Lord forever. So I know Kathy and I are going to be together again. I know there are relatives that have gone before me. They're going to be together with us because Jesus himself said this is what's going to happen through Paul. And that's a great encouragement to me. And in fact, the very last verse of that same passage, 18, he says, encourage one another with these words. Without Jesus, it's hopeless. With Jesus, there's always hope. And I want to see my sweetheart again.
Oh, gosh. As we close, what would you say to encourage somebody that is maybe towards the beginning of their grief journey during this holiday season, or just dealing with grief, like you've said, like it's not just this time, it's every day.
It's every day, yes, it is. It intensifies during the holidays, but my best advice is to take the advice of encourage one another. If I know they're a Christian, then I can read this passage, explain it to them, and tell them, you've got a great hope of seeing the person again. What if they're not Christian? Then how do you approach it? Well, nobody knows who's in heaven and who isn't. I mean, we don't know. We can never know who's made it and who hasn't until we get there. And so we've got to assume that they're gone and have gone on. Maybe at the very last second before they died, they reached out to Jesus and asked for salvation, and he gave it to them. He's not going to turn away anybody that has a heart for him. And so I had that happen to a high school friend. 30 years ago, she lost an 18-year-old son just before he was going off to college. And during the funeral ceremony, the pastor said he'd come to Christ at a function. And I thought, great. So my approach to her then was, your son's in heaven. If you want to see him again, come with Christ, and he will take you to your son. And she rejected, and she rejected, and she rejected. But I never give up on her. And I pray for she and her husband both, because it really made her distraught. So the best advice that we can use is just assume they're there and lead them. Whatever you can do to go. That's the best way to get over the grief. That's the best way to see the healing up inside. But there'll always be a scar.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us, Jim. It's so special to hear you talk about Kathy, and to be vulnerable in this space and to invite people into that journey is vulnerable and precious. So thank you for allowing us to see just a little bit of a glimpse of that. If you guys have a question for Jim, please make sure that you text in that question. He'll be joining us at the end for the panel, and hopefully he'll have an opportunity to answer that question for you. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Amber yet again. This is my friend Summer, and Summer is going to share a little bit about anxiety and depression with us. Summer is married to Brett, and they have two wonderful children who I am huge fans of, Boston and Briley. And Boston has a lot of health issues, and Brett, as well as Summer, have just experienced a lot of loss and grief, and that's kind of translated to some anxiety and depression. Summer, could you just start us off by sharing what anxiety is like for you on a daily basis, and then kind of how you recognize it and how you've learned to move forward?
Sure. Anxiety kind of presents itself in a lot of ways for me. It usually begins with excessive worry about things that are out of my control, and then fear sets in, and my thoughts just kind of disrupt my day-to-day living, where it makes it kind of hard to function. It can be paralyzing at times.
Could you share, for people that don't know, could you share just a little bit about Boston and kind of your journey with him and kind of how that's affected your anxiety?
Yeah, sure. Boston was born in 2008. He was pretty healthy at birth. Nothing appeared to be wrong at all. But when he was 5 months old, he experienced his first seizure. And from that point, within the first 2 years of his life, he coded 3 times. And I was there to witness all 3 of those incidents. And then things kind of leveled off for a while, and he started stabilizing for several years. He might have a seizure, once or twice a year. But then last year, he had scoliosis, and he had to go in for a surgery to place a couple rods in. But he ended up becoming infected and had to have 5 surgeries within 4 months. And within that time, he had to have several transfusions and just was a very, very sick little boy, and we almost lost him again. So it's just been, kind of touch and go his whole life, and it's constantly there.
Yeah. What happens to you physically when you start to get anxious?
Physically, I take on a lot of things. I feel tense muscles. I feel restless. Then I feel fatigued because I'm restless.
Yeah.
My thoughts just, consume me. At night, I lay there and have a lot of dark thoughts. And it's hard to, just let that go. Also, I can become really irritable, which I'm not proud of, but it happens. And I have a lot of feeling, like when I become irritable, then I have feelings of guilt and shame, and I feel a lot of guilt and shame too, just because I'm a Christian and I shouldn't feel this way. I should trust God, and But so it's just a lot of unrest, I would say, is the so.
What kind of got you started on your journey towards healing and figuring out healthy ways to cope with your anxiety?
At first, I was really reluctant to seek help because of the guilt and the shame surrounded by mental health, and just the stigmatism that goes with that. But a very trusted friend of mine invited me to a women's support group, and I said yes, kind of with just like, yeah, we'll see. We'll give it a whirl just to support my friend or whatever. But it turned into 5 years of some of the most meaningful healing times of my life. And that really is what catapulted me into my healing journey. And I'm not saying that I'm healed. I'm saying that it's a day-to-day journey I'm still on. So, but yeah, that was definitely... In meeting with those women, it empowered me to seek outside help with a therapist and to talk to my medical doctor about getting some other help. And those things coupled together really helped a lot, to the point where I no longer felt like I couldn't function. Like I was getting tools to re-enter life, so to speak.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome. I love that led to such a deep relationship for you, and you were like, whatever, I'll
Right.
go support my friend.
Right.
You're like, fast forward, it's been 5 years. That's amazing.
It's actually been 10 years now.
10 years
yeah.
now.
So
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
still really great friends with those women. So
Yeah, well,
Yep.
thank goodness you were trying to support that friend. So how does your anxiety kind of manifest during the holidays? Is there anything that kind of catapults that? What are the holidays like for you?
yeah, the holidays are really hard. They're a constant reminder to me that my life is not normal, in that it's a reminder of what used to be and a reminder of what's never going to be again. And there's a relentless sense of sadness and dread that come along with the holidays for me. And what has helped me is having my daughter. She's 9, and trying to make it special for her and magical, just that has helped me take the focus off of my sadness. And so it's been a help.
How has Jesus impacted your journey with anxiety and depression?
Well, I will start off by saying I've been a Christian most of my life, but when Boston was diagnosed and started just having, these crazy episodes, I felt really, really angry towards God, and I felt afraid to put my trust in him, because I felt by giving him control, I was giving him permission to take my son away from me. And that was like the one thing that I'd been fighting for so hard, was to keep him alive. And so I held on to that. I just held on to that control, like needing to keep him alive. And I just could not release that for a long time, for about 3 or 4 years. So that was hard. But when I finally came to the point of surrender, Jesus met me in my despair, and he graciously revealed to me how for decades he had been preparing me for these hardships, just one at a time, each step of the way. It was just like he took the veil from my eyes, and I could just see, like, wow, like, how kind you are, God, for seeing me, for knowing before I could even possibly know, that it was just such an encouragement to know that he was there all the time, even when I certainly didn't feel it, and especially when I didn't deserve it. And then I think probably one of the biggest realizations that I had was just sitting in church one day. I was just feeling so alone, and my sadness and my despair, and this thought just came to me. It was just, Jesus said, when I was on earth, I was lonely too. I know loneliness. And I mean, talk about a dagger, just, you knew excruciating loneliness, loneliness that I can't even, begin to comprehend. But in that moment, I felt like he was meeting me in my loneliness and reminding me again, I see you, you're not alone. And it's just such a good feeling to know that I'm seen and loved by him.
Gosh, what a beautiful picture. I feel like it's so easy to, God is a God of love and grace and acceptance, and yes to all of that, but to remember that God is present in those moments, and that Jesus felt that at such a deeper level than what we have, which feels almost impossible, right. Really, so that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. As we kind of come to a close here, could you share any encouragement that you would have for people that are, I think it's important to acknowledge that everybody has, circumstantial anxiety and depression. You go through just very serious things. And that's hard, and you have to go through that and lean on God in that moment. But then it's a whole other thing, to kind of share what you're talking about, where you just have that daily struggle. And you and I have talked about how, depression and anxiety isn't something you conquer. It is an ongoing journey. So what would you say to people that are maybe haven't been able to get help yet, or are just starting the process of healing?
Mm-hmm. I would say, first of all, just be kind to yourself. Mm-hmm. Don't beat yourself up for how you feel. If Boston or Briley, my kids, if they were to be depressed or to feel shame or guilt, would I say, come on, snap out of it? This is ridiculous. Yeah. Of course not. Like, I would move heaven and earth to help them. I would do whatever I could do. But so I need to give myself that same grace and that same compassion. Yeah. And that was really hard for me to do. Let's see. Another thing is that it's natural when you're depressed, you want to isolate. You don't want to be around people. You want to stay on the couch all day. You want to curl up in your blankets all day long and check out. Don't do it. Stop. So try to surround yourself with people that are safe, people that genuinely care about you and see you. Some people might think that's family, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just an outside person that you need. You just need to surround yourself. And in doing that, it's a very vulnerable thing. It's hard. It's scary to ask for help and to just even a simple check-in. Like, I had a group of girls that for many years we just did like a daily check-in, and it was you'd think it's just like whatever, but just knowing that they're there every single day and that they're my people and I'm not alone. So I think that's really important. And then finally, in 2014, I was diagnosed with cancer, and my husband's grandma, who I love dearly, taught me this little prayer that she prays. She passed it on to me, and I prayed it every day during my cancer journey. And it's simply, God, I love you. I need you, and please let my faith be greater than my fear. And I know it sounds very simple, but it's powerful and it's healing, and it really got me through those days of treatment and surgeries and days that I just didn't feel like I can't do it. So I just put my trust in Jesus, and I'm thankful. It's what's been neat about the fact that you asked me to be a part of this is that 10, 12 years ago, I would never could have seen this. And if you would ask, the girls that were in my group all those years ago, that I would be sitting here today, they probably could not fathom it. And I know that I'm just like, I can't believe that. Not to say that, I've got it all together now, but the fact that I can stand here today and tell you that depression and anxiety has not overcome me. I'm living proof of that, and so I'm just really grateful.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and for letting us in and sharing that with us. If you guys get the chance to meet Boston, you just gotta do it. That kid is just the best, and he radiates joy in a way that I have never experienced, and I just love that kid. Summer is going to join our panel, so even though it's kind of towards the end of our time together tonight, if you've got a question for her, please still text that in, and we're going to get ready for our panel. Thanks again, Summer. You did so good.
it's been great to hear from these guests of ours, and just really appreciate their vulnerability to come and share in front of a camera like this. It's really difficult to do, but it's helpful, and hopefully you know that when you're feeling vulnerable, it's communicating strength to somebody else. So that's how we encourage. Encourage actually means to lend courage. So you're lending someone else courage when you share like this. So we have some questions we want to ask to the panel that kind of come through the discussions that we've had already. And so I'm going to ask questions, and then we'll cut to them and let them get a chance to answer. So first question is for the Scotts. The Scotts, talking about conflict. So people say don't talk about religion and politics, right? Those are two things you stay away from because they come with sort of charged emotions and a lot of tension. Would you say that we should avoid tense subjects with our family, or should we engage in tense subjects? And what are some clues about how to know when to do that, when not to do that?
You guys are bringing it. I think yes and no. I don't think every time is the time to talk about politics. Maybe when everybody's at the dinner table, traditionally is not the time you want to bring up the really heated things. But it's good to talk about hard stuff. That's how we move forward. That's how we learn from each other. So I've heard that before, like from my family members saying, like, well, we just won't talk about it. But it's still there. It doesn't go away. And I've got people in my family that I disagree with, but I love and respect and can learn from them. So I think that there are times when maybe you don't dig deep and go at it, but it's important to not just ignore the hard stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the intent. I mean, so many of the political conversations especially, and I'm sure depending on the issue, conversations connected to religion too are not typically about having a conversation, but about proving a point. And so if that's the case, probably steer clear, look for another pitch. But if you're really going into it as a learner, if you're really going into it as somebody who's processing, then what better place to do that than with people who love you a whole heap and who you love a whole heap. So I think it's all about finding the right time and the right intention behind it as well.
Excellent. Thanks. Good answer. This question is for Jim. Jim, is there anything that you do specifically during the holidays to honor, remember your wife?
Yes. She died November 29th, right, 3 days after Thanksgiving and before Christmas. And so the celebration service, we recorded that and had a DVD made, and then I had it cut down because it was so long. But I watch it every year just because I start getting anxious as each anniversary comes up, and I've been the last couple weeks. I haven't watched the DVD, but I'm going to on the anniversary. And sometimes some of my children come and grandchildren, sometimes they don't. It's okay. That's one of the things that I do. I also put together a couple of PowerPoint presentations of different pictures of her, and then some text to explain what different things were that were in our relationship over those 53 years. And it's just a big comfort. It's like eating comfort food. It's good to see her progressing through the ages and knowing that our relationship kept getting stronger and stronger. And we didn't have, I said it was a fairy tale. It wasn't really a fairy tale. We argued a lot. We had a lot of family conflict. She was an Irish lass and I was an Irish lad, so we had to argue. But that's how and it wasn't the best, but it's how we worked and solidified our relationship. So remembering those things and posting on Facebook. I have posted on Facebook a lot of memories. Get a lot of great feedback on that. So they're just different things that I do. Sometimes it's different every time, and sometimes I do some of the same things every time. But yeah, the holidays particularly, her birthday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, all those things are really important. And a lot of times things just pop up out of nowhere and just bring the grief and the tears. And that's okay too, because I know it's healing.
Excellent. That's really cool, man. Thank you. Next question is for Russ. Russ, has there been anything that you've done for your kids, particularly during the holidays, that would help them have some sense of normalcy, or just to feel like, a family connection, or just to have some special moments at the holidays in spite of their family not being together like normal?
Well, one of the things that we've tried to do is to, develop our own special traditions now. What's in the past is in the past, but now, we've got a whole, life to live, and so we've tried to create some special memories, some special things that we do at Thanksgiving, things we do at Christmas. One of the things that we've done is with our, and one of the things that kids really appreciate is now they've got a blended family, because now they've got an extra couple brothers and extra couple sister-in-laws, and now they've got little, nieces and nephews and all that. So they love to get together and, hang out with them, and it's always a hoot. I'll share one story that was kind of funny. We were having Christmas. I think it was one Christmas ago. But we were together, and my one little grandson that's 3 years old, my son gave all the grandkids, they gave them these little Nerf guns, and they were all excited about them. They unwrapped them, they opened them up. And then but my daughter had her little dog with us. And as soon as my 3-year-old grandson opened up the present, he said, "Shoot the puppy." My daughter was mortified, We all, rolled over laughing. But it's I think more than anything, it's kind of that blended family and creating things together and just enjoying each other together is kind of made a new chapter.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so for summer, you mentioned that at different points that you went to see a doctor, a medical professional, or a mental health professional, a therapist. How did you know it was time to do that? I think maybe a lot of people feel like maybe what they're feeling is normal. They should be able to handle it on their own. How do you know when you need to go see some kind of professional to get some extra help?
For me, it had a lot to do with my kids. I knew that they deserved a lot more than I was giving them, and a lot more than I was capable of on my own. So I think that had probably the biggest part in my decision, was just wanting to do that, be a better person for them. So.
Great, that's a good barometer for sure. So just a couple more questions, and I'd like it's just one more question, but I'd like for each of you to answer it. So we probably have a lot of people watching who are not going through something specific themselves, but someone that they love or care about is. What's one thing you would say if you have a loved one who's going through this particular issue? How would you advise them to reach out in a way that's helpful and supportive, and does good and not harm? If you know what I mean. So we'll start with the Scotts on this one. If someone's watching who has a friend or a loved one who's involved in a pretty intense family conflict, that's got them worried or anxious, how would you advise them to talk to their friend about this?
It's tough.
I think based on what we've heard from people up here on the panel, find somebody named Steve. Befriend that person.
Yeah.
I think that's incredibly helpful.
My Steve just passed away a couple weeks ago. So.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Now, I'm not sure. What comes to your mind with that?
I think that the one thing that we've done when talking to people that we are in, that we know conflict may arise, or we just say like we love you, you know, like we respect you. And I think it's really hard for things to go really poorly with someone when they know how like deep the love is and how deep the care is. So I think if you had to tell somebody how to deal with conflict, have them maybe think about the person they're talking to and how much they, like there's probably already a relationship there. So look at those positive things that were already in that relationship. And if you're looking at them with love, it's really hard for things to go badly.
And to add one other thing, one of the most practical things that we've heard recently that was good for us to hear, and even if we were, trying to be an asset to somebody who we were connected to, if we weren't directly involved in the conflict, a piece of advice that was really helpful was just to intentionally not have the last word, to intentionally let somebody else be the one with the last word, and then you're not walking away thinking, I'm the victor in this argument discussion, and you're not encouraging somebody else to be the victor, and just kind of take the low place as we talk about, and let somebody else have the last word.
That's really good. Very helpful. Thank you. Jim, same question. If someone out there has a loved one who is experiencing grief, maybe in a newer or just more intense way during the holiday season, what would you say? How can they be a good friend to someone who's going through that?
Time and attention. Spend time with them as much as you can, and let them know. Don't wait for them to reach out to you. You reach out to them. I've had to do that with some people that I've noticed that have lost loved ones, and I notice it seems like they're not getting any attention. And so I will put it on my calendar to text them or email them or even give them a call just to see how they're doing. And that's a big comfort for people when they know that somebody else is there. It's easy in grief to think the world is passing you by and you're standing still. And what's wrong with me? To have somebody come alongside you on their own is a big help.
That's helpful. Thank you. Russ, same question.
Well, I think what they shared is fantastic. I guess I would add to it is to try to really pay attention. I'm forever asking the Spirit to help me to see what it is He wants me to do in a particular situation. And so I think asking God to help you to have the insight in a particular situation, because every situation is kind of different, and then and really ask God, and then pay attention and watch them. And I think a lot of times God will simply make it clear to you what it is that He wants you to do with them, if you'll simply pay attention and ask.
That's excellent advice. Thank you. Summer, same question for you.
I've had the most time to think about it, and I'm still kind of I think just kind of alluding back to the loneliness thing, just reassuring people that they aren't alone, that they are seen, and that they matter, that their pain is not lost on you. I know, like, I have a couple of friends that still they remember important dates that, within our story, and they will reach out and just say, hey, I'm thinking of you today. I know it's a tough, a tough day. So just being present and not waiting for them to reach out to you, but just being the initiator. And something that I also appreciated that Jim said was in your interview was not putting a time limit on your grief, and how some people just, they think, my gosh, it's been this long, get over it, you know, and it's just not like that. So just being gracious, compassionate to the situation, and not expecting people to do things on your timeline, but to just allow them the time and space that they need to heal.
Great. Thanks so much. Again, we just want to thank these guests who have come out to share, and thank you for tuning in. And whether you're watching this live or the recorded version, I hope what you experienced tonight, first of all, is to know if you're going through something difficult this holiday season, you're not alone. There are a lot of people who have been down a similar path and made it and survived and moved on to something positive. And so hopefully you see that there's some connection, there's some community in where you are, and there's hope for the future. If there's somebody that you love that's going through one of these things, we hope that you've been able to get some resources just to help you be a good friend, a kind and loving friend, or a family member to somebody that's dealing with a difficult time, and just be sensitive to their unique needs and unique situation. So we have a lot of resources. As I said at the beginning, we really just wanted this evening to be a conversation starter, an on-ramp to ongoing discussion, because the real power of transformation is in relationships. It's in spending time together with Jesus at the center of your conversation. And that's how life change really happens. When we allow God to work through us, to help move people in the right direction, just to show the kind of love and grace that he shows to us on a daily basis. So please connect with these resources. You can go to our website. You can find the guides for each of these areas on the website. And again, there's scripture lists there, there's prayer guides, there's conversation guides, and then other resources. And so please connect with those resources. And then if there's a gap in something that we missed, we know this has been a short time to cover a lot of these big subjects. Please reach out. You can connect with us through Amber if you want to have an ongoing conversation about this with somebody on a more like a one-on-one basis. You can connect with Amber. I think her email is going to be there available for you, and she will just kind of serve as a coordinator to help connect you with the right person, so that you can have some ongoing conversation. What we want you to know is that you are loved. Initially, first of all, you're loved by God. We love because he first loved us, and he showed his love for us through Jesus. And you're also loved by your church family. Even if you're not a part of this church family, you are loved by Jesus followers wherever you are. And it is our desire to see you live with peace and joy and purpose that comes from a Jesus-centered life. And so because we love you, we encourage you to have these conversations, continue to connect with people, and continue to seek out ways to put Jesus right at the center of whatever it is that you're going through. So with that, we're going to sign off for the evening. Thanks again for tuning in. And again, this will be available as a recording. So if you know someone who missed it, they'll be able to find this on our YouTube channel and a link from our website later on. Okay, thanks. Have a great night.